Hey everybody, we are back. Welcome to another episode of Force Chatter. I know it's been a while. We took a week off, but we are back. And not only are we back, but because there's like practically no news for the last week or two, we thought what better time to bring on somebody we've wanted to bring onto the show for a while now. The mediocre modeler himself, Kelvin, is joining us on Force Chatter, and we are going to talk 3D printing, props, cosplay, all kinds of fun stuff. So, welcome. It is great to have you here.
Well, I gotta be honest with you. I've been listening to you guys for years, and it's very comforting to get my Star Wars news from you guys. But then when you said, hey, you want to come on the show, externally I'm like, yeah, that's cool. Yeah. Internally I'm like,
Oh, little does he know. I thought you've seen our shows before. You should know that this is not
there.
We are glad to have you here. So like I said, we don't really have any news to cover. And in fact, we don't have show notes. I kind of feel like, I mean, you've been a member of our Discord community for a long time. People have recognized you from our Discord server, which, by the way, there's been some changes to that. We'll talk about that later in the episode too. But I didn't write down questions or show notes or anything. I thought, we can improv this. We can just wing it.
Yeah,
we'll just have a conversation. Yeah, just do a conversation. Exactly. Because you're just, you're one of the guys and gals.
That works for me.
Cool.
Yeah, that works for me.
All right. So we're going to start at the beginning. And of course, we're all going to hop in and just kind of, throw down whatever questions and comments we have and stuff. But for the kind of the intro here, let me know, what was your first experience with Star Wars specifically? And then we'll move into what got you interested in cosplay and prop building and stuff like that. And while you're doing that, I'm going to catch up with stuff I should have done before the recording and fix some audio levels here.
Well, I was born at a very young age. Right, there you go. It all started with three sisters and a peanut. No.
Tim, you're fired.
So if you want to go all the way back to the beginning, my sci-fi, it actually started with like the Lone Ranger, because he was my first actual superhero, right?
Cool.
And it just so happened that the Lone Ranger was followed by Batman. Well, that opened all the rest of the doors. Then you get into everything else that was on TV at that point, Lost in Space, watching all the episodes of Lost in Space and Voyager, But lucky enough, when we get 77, Star Wars hit, and I got to go and sit in the theater and watch it, and none of us knew what we were seeing.
Right.
It was just like, whoa, we had no idea how much this was going to change the world. So I can almost even say I saw it, I liked it, and then like the rest of the summer went by and it just kind of disappeared from my consciousness. It wasn't a thing until everyone started talking about it, and then the awards started coming. You almost need time to process it.
Like that's something people from the more recent generations, and no offense, Tom, don't really... They don't get, like, we can tell them this over and over again and they can acknowledge it as truth, but they can't relate to the fact that back then this didn't exist. This sort of thing, this big science fiction Hollywood blockbuster. Like you had, you had 2001, you had Close Encounters, and you had Jaws. That's it. Not just for sci-fi, but for any sort of like big summer blockbuster film. The entire movie industry worked different back then. The way you consumed your movies, and I'm not just talking streaming. Even if we were 10 years ago, I could say this. It was just a very different time. So Star Wars was something that like nobody knew what to do with.
Yeah, I mean, things would stay in the theaters longer. They wouldn't be just 2-3 weeks in and out. They would be there for 6 months.
So that's the one thing. And then they would even come back and revisit theaters. Like I saw Star Wars. I don't think I saw it in the first run. I think I saw it in the re-release just prior to Empire Strikes Back, I think. And so there's that aspect of it, but then there's also just the science fiction thing. Like you had Flash Gordon, you had Lost in Space, which that was television and not theater. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You just like, this was new. Like nobody did this.
I mean, even just talk about the way they filmed it and the cutting edge for sci-fi, for special effects. I mean, special effects before this movie were like, Tim and I shooting something in the backyard with a couple strings holding the, model rocket ship and so forth. And it was like, this was groundbreaking,
That was Oscar winning, what you're describing.
But don't you think that, in my opinion, Star Wars was like the first film where people actually would go back and watch it, and then how many times have you seen it? How many times?
Yeah.
That wasn't happening before.
No,
Never. So I mean, it was a huge deal before we knew it. So, which leads you into Empire, and I didn't know that there was more of the story. If Star Wars had ended with the first film, I was completely content. But thank God they made Empire, because if you ask me, well, which is your favorite film, it's got to be Empire. I mean, just without a doubt. Just there's just so much. The pacing was great. Everything was, and the way I look at films, I usually judge them, but like science fiction films, I judge them by their tech. Can I build that? Is that a model that I would either want to buy or own? So that's kind of where the model thing kind of fits in there. So
I assume then your mind was just blown to smithereens when, certainly after A New Hope, but definitely after you see something like The Executor come across the screen, you're like, tell me everything about how this was made.
Well, even at that point, I don't even think I realized that these were model kits. It just didn't, I was still young enough where it didn't register. The thing that got me really going down, because by then, you get into early adulthood, Star Trek came out, and then all the model ships from Star Trek were coming out. So that's just the regular thing. You could go to the store, you could pick up the models. But the thing that really got me was on the laser disc. It was the Lucasfilms archive, where they went back and showed all the background stuff that like the speeder and all that. That's what really got me thinking along the lines of making props. And hey, there's actually guys that get paid to do this for. I'm like, wait, what? By this time, I'm already an adult. It's just too late to do it. But that is also kind of the thing that I use as a level, because we all have jobs. We have this. All this is a hobby, and you have to do what you can within the time. So if you've seen any of the actual studio models, they look horrible. If you look at them up close, they really do horrible. Yes. And I'm like, I've been fighting all these years to make my paint look pristine and blah, blah, blah. And I get to look at it and it looks like that. So that's where I kind of came up with Mediocre Modeler. That's kind of the scale. It's got to be somewhere between ugly studio scale and sideshow. If I get that bill, I'm doing good,
Well, it's also different too, because resolution's gotten so much better lately. Props have to be better than they were back, say, 20 years ago. I remember when they were talking about doing some of the reshooting stuff for Next Generation on the movies. They're shooting in higher definition film. They're like, we had to redo all these name plaques on the doors because we had jokes on them. We had funny names and stuff that we had to take, because you could now read them. You couldn't read them on television, but you could read them in this stuff and higher res video stuff. So props could be what they were back then, but nowadays they have to be a lot better.
Yeah, you can fool some things with the lighting and stuff like that, but only to an extent. But I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm thinking back to the Batman comment, and I'm just thinking, like, if that was your introduction to Batman, it's a miracle that I'm still in the camp that is like the least Batman-y Batman ever. And people love it. People love Adam West.
When it was on TV, it was, when we were kids, it was like, wow. That was before me even too, but
that was about as serious as I got back. How old were we? Like 7, 8 years old, and then, even that, just that introduction to Batman. Let's fast forward to Buck Rogers. How many of the villains from Batman were on Buck Rogers.
Were they?
You know, I mean, so, and if it weren't for me having that in my history, I wouldn't know that, you know. So
a lot of those actors were really prolific.
I didn't know
and that's something
that.
that happened across the board, you know. I mean, that was just their job. That's what they did. They just showed up and, you know, okay, you're gonna do that. So
and now they all get the start in Law and Order, so it's a different.
Yeah, that's
the natural
true.
order of things.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about props for a minute here. I mean, we started touching on this for resolution and how you make things, but you know, I think that a lot of the props that are out there being made by a lot of makers, and I'll put you in that same category, is, you know, they're just as good, if not better, than what we see on screen for a lot of the stuff even from like 20 years ago. You know, the prop making for at-home stuff has just gone from, you know, level here to like, you know, sky's the limit. So how'd you get started in I mean, what was your first prop you made?
Ooh. Well, okay, so there's a convention in Louisville called Wonderfest, and it is science fiction and horror. And I would go there, and a lot of that stuff was, back then, it was more resin kit. So the first one, I think, was Luke's lightsaber in resin, you know, and it was, like I said, this long before you had the electronics and everything. And I was just happy to have just a piece of resin that, you know, I took home and painted. And it was just like, okay, that's kind of close, but that just kind of fires your brains into, well, what actually did they use? And then you start down that path of, okay, well, that's something that I can find. That's just a normal thing. And once you realize that a lot of these props are just normal everyday things that they put a coat of paint on and stick some lights on it and hold it way back here so you can't really recognize it, you know.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And it's fun. I mean, we're getting that less and less, but still, even it's like, okay, episode 1 of Star Wars, how many props in the background were things that, like, they went to Walmart and picked up off the shelves, repainted it, glued something else to it, and said, oh, now it's this widget.
The communicator that Qui-Gon Jinn uses to communicate with Obi-Wan on Tatooine when Obi-Wan's back on the ship is actually a women's razor.
Yeah.
And my company makes those. And yeah, so
well, see,
and the highlight stick in the background in Anakin's room. Yeah.
So the thing about prop building is not so much is being able to look at things and saying, not what is it, but what can it be? Okay. So, well, just for instance, okay, the E11 blaster, right? Now, this one is actually made from a British Sterling machine gun. Okay.
Yep.
How did you get a hold of a British Sterling machine gun, Calvin? That's what I want to know.
Well, okay, I did get a hold of it, but not in one piece. You have to buy them demilitarized. So this thing, they take a.
Oh, I was kidding. You actually have like that's actually a real
on it.
Okay, hold on. This is the most beautiful sound in the world. No, that's not it. This is it.
Wow.
That right there, you're just like.
So needless to say, you can't take that to conventions.
Load your weapons, men.
No. Well, okay. It doesn't have the firing pin in it.
You'd have to disassemble it and prove to someone that. And frankly, you could have the firing pin in your pocket, so you're not leaving the house with that one.
And my E11 weighs about 5 ounces. It's actually way too light. So
you wouldn't want to troop with that all day anyway. It's too heavy. I think it probably weighs around 18 pounds, if not more.
Wow. Yeah,
so
that's heavy.
So, but I mean, it makes you think, well, these guys were, carrying these around in World War II.
Oh yeah.
But it was saving their lives. So I think it's worth it.
Tom and I were military guys. We're like, psh, that's nothing.
18. But, you can keep your 18 pounds. I'll take that.
Tom and I used to walk around all day long with 2 M60s, one in each hand, playing Rambo.
But yeah, I mean, so it kind of goes both ways. you take existing things and you make it look whatever, or you can just 3D print stuff. Now, 3D printing is definitely
that's the game changer, isn't it?
Back. Yes, it is. It is totally the game changer. But that's kind of the end of the story. Let's walk it back.
Yes.
If you just wanted to get started in model building, that's why I started my web channel anyway. I was doing this anyway, and my motto is go build something. And what that actually means is it doesn't matter what you build. It doesn't matter if you're painting or plants or building a car or whatever. Just if you build something that keeps your mind working, it keeps you young, keeps you just in the game. Mm-hmm. The thing I build just happens to be sci-fi. So if you wanted to do models for the bang for the buck to just get started and the most satisfaction, I would go with the Bondi kits, because a lot of the Bondi kits, so this one here, that one is actually the Boba Fett kit, but it's repainted. So if I had my own armor.
I might have your camera zoomed in too far for people to actually see that here, because I did some creative stuff on my end. Okay, yeah.
Nice. That good?
All right. Yep.
That's great.
Nice.
So that's actually Boba Fett, but the Bondi kits run about $20, $25. If you go to Hobby Lobby when they're having their 40% off coupons or whatever, you can save some money. It's a good way to get started. And all those kits, or you snap them off the sprue, you pop them together, and you can put them on the shelf. I like that. For me, I stopped collecting action figures because as good as they look, I didn't get any satisfaction out of it, because you just pulled it off. The hunt was the thing. Right. And with the internet and all that being taken away, the hunt is gone. It'll be here on Wednesday.
You get it home and it's like, oh, well, I'm going to.
Kelvin's over here really damaging my self-confidence.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Like rethinking my life.
But you know what, Tom, though? That's another thing too, though. Like there are people who have collectibles and they put them on display like you have. I'm sure you have some collectibles that are not on display, right? Maybe?
Yes.
Okay. And I have limited display space in my current place, but even when I had things out on display, like those were the exciting things. And then other things, like you said, it's the hunt, and you go and you find, and you're like, oh, this is awesome in the store. And you get home and you're like, I'm going to put that right there.
Yeah.
And then eventually later, it goes in a storage box. Like it's not the same as, the few things I've built, any sort of craft or woodworking or things like that. It is different when you create it. Mm-hmm. It's more fulfilling.
I would say something that kind of wanders that line in the middle is Lego.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you are still, while it is prefabricated and you're getting all the instructions for it, you're still doing that assembly. And there's just, especially some kits which are just like huge and complicated and they take a long time. And
as it comes together, it's
so cool to see.
Yeah, there's more of a journey to it.
It really is fulfilling. Yep. Yeah. Which is like one of the things that I absolutely love about Lego.
And I love Lego too. I've still got 2 collector's edition boxes in there I've got to open up at some point. But I do have to say that while the stuff I've created isn't anything like what Kelvin's done, it is a little bit different when you don't get an instruction set. Like I've got mad respect for you being able to come up with the ways. How do I put this? Your channel, Mediocre Modeler. If anybody hasn't seen it, just hit YouTube, do a search for Mediocre Modeler, or we'll put it down in the link in the show notes. But you describe not just the process for what you do. What I like about your channel is you describe all the mistakes. You say, hey, I got this thing here and it didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. And here's why. You see this here? That's not right. And then you go through your mental process of what do you have to do? How do you troubleshoot this now? And as fulfilling as completing a Lego set is, the biggest troubleshooting there is really crap. I'm missing a piece for about 20 minutes. And then you realize, oh, I'm not actually missing the piece. But like you have a whole different scenario where you've got to be able to troubleshoot this thing didn't print right, or the paint didn't work the way I thought it would, or the Bondo got messed up, or I sanded down more than I meant to, or things like that. And And I love the fact that you actually go over that with people and explain to them what you're doing, because to me, Lou, I know you just got a 3D printer recently. I was always in that camp where I'm just not going to do it because it's intimidating to me. But then like watching your channel and seeing that, no, you can get past that. You just kind of have to work with it a little bit. Now I'm thinking, yeah, I might dip my foot in the pool on this before too long.
Think about it. It's 3D printing is good because like the rolls of filament aren't really overly expensive. And as far as like a failed print, I don't throw anything away because you never know what it can be used for. So perfect example, I decided to make the Stormbreaker, right? And so I like the older classic the Beta Ray Bill Stormbreaker, not the new. No, there's nothing wrong with the new one. Don't get but I like that design. But
for you non-Marvel fans out there, he's talking about in the MCU, it's Thor's hammer. But Stormbreaker actually used to belong to another Thor-like character named Beta Ray Bill from the Thor comics. That's what he's talking about. So,
yeah, sorry.
It's okay. We have some people in the audience who dabble a little bit, but they're not like hardcore geeks in some ways like we are. So,
well, see, if this were my video, I'd be like, oh, I need to go back and edit that back.
Oh, we don't edit. We're not as professional here.
But so I wanted to get that printed. So in 3D printing, a lot of this stuff takes a long time. The Stormbreaker print was 72 hours. Wow. So I got it done, started it on the printer, and go off to work. Well, that just happened to be right in the middle of when we were having our rolling blackouts for the winter vortex.
Oh, man.
And so it got and I was home from work that day, and I'm sitting here, and the printer's going in the back, and I didn't have any I'm on my game, and I'm just like, I'm like, there's nothing you can do.
And so your next purchase is a UPS to just simply put on that so that way it never dies.
I don't know. That's only going to run it for a little while.
Some printers actually have a power out. I think, Lou, doesn't yours have that?
Yeah, mine does. I haven't tested it yet because I do have a UPS hooked up to mine because I had an issue where I knew we were doing some work on our power supply at one point, and I was like, you know what? I got a print going. I want to start it today. I'm like, let me just plug this in just so I have a backup in case it flickers. It'll last a couple minutes, on the UPS. So,
Yep.
Well, so for those of you who do not know, I have a Facebook group for 3D printing, and Lou is part of that group. So.
It's almost like a support group where I'm on a set program here, I think. I blame him for the addiction. It's a lot of fun. It really is.
I should be getting a royalty check from Creality. I'm just telling you, because people are just like, I got a printer because I watched your channel. I'm just like, oh, well, that's great, And it is great. It's great to have people, just do something,
Right.
But that print, it's half the hammer, and what could it be? And so I looked at it, and it looks like it could be like a space habitat, because it's got a very round shape to it.
Oh, yeah.
So it's not necessarily. Yes, it's a failure, but it's a failure for that one particular thing.
Right.
Doesn't mean it couldn't be something else. Plenty of dioramas you could use to do it with.
Oh, I have some failures I can't be used for anything. Believe me. Yeah.
Your cat can probably, find some
cat toy.
It's in the basement, so my cats aren't near it. But I've got some. I've had, in part of what you go through with learning the 3D printer is, what are the quirks of their printer? What are the quirks of how it's got to work? Is this filament different than that filament? And I had a lot of adhesion problems where prints weren't sticking to the heated base, and they'd come off, and I'd come back downstairs in the morning, I have just a pile of angel hair. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not going to work, because it's just printing in midair where it's just spitting out filament and nothing attached to it. But it's live and learn, and like you said, the filament's inexpensive, so you just chalk it up to a learning curve. And what can I do to make this better? Do I use a glue stick? Do I use some hairspray? I mean, for a bald guy, it's a little weird going into the store and buying Aquanet, but
that is hilarious.
Does anybody
the key
want to
is
tell him?
Aquanet, just like, well, it's not like I need a whole lot of Aquanet either.
So
yeah, Lou has had a couple of prints that they basically look like the first pancake. Because I mean, the first pancake never comes out right.
So that's how you know you're doing it right.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I have a question.
Let me ask real quick.
Yeah.
How early did you? Because I don't have a good idea of the history, accessibility of 3D printers when they hit mainstream. How early were you into that realm? Like, how early did you adopt that technology?
I've only been doing 3D printing for a little over a year.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's been around for a number of years. The printers have just become reasonable in my impression. Mm-hmm. Anything under $500 is like reasonable within the past, say, 2 years. What do you think, Lou?
Yeah, because I mean, I had looked at it a few years back, and it was like, I'm not spending $1,200 to $1,500 for a printer. I'm like, there's no way. I can't justify that.
Right.
And then, started talking with you a little more, started doing some investigation. I'm like, wait, there's some 3D printers that are like $300. I'm like, that's doable. I ended up spending around $5, I think we talked about. But, to me, I think that is to the point now where it's becoming more accessible to a lot of people. It's not that $1,500 to $2,000 price range, which they used to be not too long ago.
Well, and then that's just for the filament printers. Then when you start talking resin printers, that's it's a whole different set of. Okay, so the Mandalorian, the Razor Crest. So I downloaded a file for the Razor Crest, and it's going to be probably about this big. So most of the parts will print just fine on my filament printer, but the landing gear, it's a landing foot, and then it's got a post, and then they're like hydraulic lines to it. It's so fine that my printer won't go that fine. However, a resin printer could. So I'm thinking about doing a resin printer too.
Yeah.
How much does that set a person back?
Razor Crest without the landing.
Yeah. Well, you just
apparently it just blows
a lot
up.
of those failed prints I have, they're just like all the hair. That's my Razor Crest.
There you go.
There you go. But and this technology has been around for a long time, so it's getting better and better and better, and just more accessible to us. I mean, you look at the space program or Formula One, for example, race cars. I mean, there's a lot of stuff. It used to be called rapid prototyping, and they would make things more resin printers than filament printers, but they would prototype parts that way and see if this is going to work in a wind tunnel. And then if it was, then they would start making a carbon fiber version of it or something. But this technology has been a way for a lot of companies to do a lot of stuff, and now that it's been out there for 15, 20 years, it's becoming accessible to us price wise.
Right.
Yeah.
I have two questions now.
Kelvin, go ahead, Eric.
Go ahead, Tim.
Have you ventured into doing any of your own drawings, or are you just downloading files?
The Stormbreaker was the first one that I, quote unquote, designed on my own. So I basically downloaded Fusion 360 and taught myself how to use that, which was a struggle. And actually, that's the first one that I thought about making it accessible to the public, putting it on like Thingiverse, because you don't want to violate any copyright laws. And then even printing other people's stuff, since not a whole lot of people are doing that, I kind of felt weird about like if I painted it and printed it, well, could I even sell it then? Because you still have the same problem.
Right.
But the Stormbreaker, since that one is solely mine, and little things are starting to come out. One of my buddies on Facebook he's doing a Quill costume for Wonderfest, hopefully, if we still have it this year, and he's got gauntlets, and the gauntlets have a vent type thing on the gauntlet here, and he's like, do you think you could make something like that for me? I'm like, well, I can give it a shot. And so I just sat down and fired up, and that's what I came up with. It's pretty close. Nice. He wants it to have a little bit more of a curve in it, and maybe a little bit thinner, but that's the kind of thing you can do. It went from concept to physical in less than a day.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Yeah. And I am nowhere near that for the whole designing of stuff in Fusion. I've played it a little bit, but it's still a long way off for me. But you mentioned printing stuff, and something we should mention is downloading files from Thingiverse or a lot of other sites. Most of them do have a Creative Commons license to them, where you can print them personally, but you can't print them to sell them. So
now,
usually you got to respect the maker's wishes and do that. And in fact, I'm a member of the Mudripper Builders group and the iCat Builders group on Facebook and stuff. And a lot of these guys are producing files for free that you can download and use, but again, just for yourself.
And that's something I wanted to get to too, is a lot of people who haven't done anything with 3D printing before, they don't understand, like maybe you've even seen physically what the printers look like, but you don't understand how to get the data to send to the printer. Before we get to that though, two quick questions. Number one, back to the resin thing. I assume resin printers are more expensive because they can do finer detail?
Not really.
Okay.
From what the research I've been doing, they're just a lot more work because the resin solution is very toxic. So, a 3D printer prints up, right? You're building up from the bottom. Mm-hmm. Resin printers, it takes the plate and it dips it down into the resin, and then it goes up and it builds. So it builds upside down. And so you have to have your gloves on there because you've got all this resin dripping. It's got to be taken off. You need to rinse it. It has to be cured, so you have to cure it in like UV light. So there are a lot more steps involved in doing it. And so I was watching Adam Savage. He just got a resin printer, and so he's got the printer. He just built like a booth that he puts the thing in, and it rotates and it cures it. And there's just so much involved with it. So you're probably maybe $1,000 investment for all, so you can make your little Star Wars chess set.
They're also smaller in terms of what they can print too, right? They're a much smaller volume. You can
I'll stick with the filament ones for now. And another thing, before I get to this thing that we were just talking about like how you actually go about printing stuff, for people who aren't necessarily going to do like big cosplay uniforms or big weapons or stuff like that, what else can you do with a 3D printer? And this kind of gets back into this other thing. I know there are websites that you can go and you can download the files that are basically like the 3D shapes for different things. Like you can download a little Grogu Baby Yoda figurine, for example, from some website and print it. Or if you're good with like CAD design and stuff like that, or if you want to learn it, you can download a program like Fusion or something like that and build something yourself. So like, if you're not sure whether you want to go down the road into cosplay and like larger objects and assembling them and, the more complex refineries that happen afterwards, can someone get enough use out of a 3D printer to make it worth it with just smaller things and little knickknacks and stuff? Is there a big, I don't want to say market for it, but like, is there a big community for that sort of thing?
Ooh, that's...
I've known people that have printed out like, I need a pencil holder, and they print out a pencil holder. Or like you said, I need something for like a gauntlet or something, and you just whip something up and you print out like a little thing for something. Like, it seems like there are a lot of different things that you could, like you said, a chess set. I mean, you could literally print out chess pieces as long as you can find the files for them online, which I'm sure you can.
Yeah. So what I usually do is if you think you have the inclination, I say go to Thingiverse. You don't have to join or anything. You just look up Thingiverse or Shapeways, There's so many different websites out there, and just browse through the web, their catalogs of files that they have. What would you want? Salt and pepper shaker. I downloaded some napkin holders that had the Jedi logo on them. I mean,
cool.
You can almost anything you can think of. It's probably out there, but that's where you start. How useful is this going to be for me? Then you take into consideration the cost. Okay, so you spend $200 or $300 on this thing. I know a couple of guys who feel like their printer has to be running constantly in order for them to feel like they got their money's worth out of it. I don't necessarily feel that way. I haven't run a print for almost a week now, but when I run it, I'm running it for several days. So I think that's probably the first place. That's going to be your litmus test as to whether you can you really want or have the need to be in it. You know, I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So,
real quick, Tom, I know you got to cut out here in a couple of minutes. Any other questions before you need to bolt?
Well, I would say, when are we getting our Force Chatter action figure set? Because I've yet to see that. I don't know that anybody on Thingiverse has been brave enough to do that. That'd probably break the internet. Have you found that you have a preference? Like, it has 3D printing in the year or so that you've been involved in it. Has it won you over? Have you shifted your efforts that way, or are you still finding that sort of your more traditional building methods, the ones that you've done for a lot longer, are the ones you prefer at this point?
It's all encompassing. I like to think like as if I were on the prop department of a movie set. Those guys aren't typically one-off guys. They can do a little bit of everything. Like this is my Mandalorian costume. Well, the armor's foam, so I had to teach myself how to work with the foam. This is sewn, it's just deciding what you want to build and then what's it gonna take to do that. It could take some modeling skills, it could take some car building skills, it could take, and even just doing a plastic model is just the same thing. I may be standing on this scale, but that made me think at some point in my life, I want to build a car. Well, I'll have my model building skills to be able to, it's pretty much the same paint, the same process, it's the same Bondo, I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So it's just all encompassing. You just use it, you just add it to your repertoire, just like, a new skill that you weren't learn at work, for work.
See, Kelvin talks about this stuff as if it's like, picking up something simple. Like, I can't even think of something like the way that you're putting it. And then I get my hands on it and it's like one of those infomercials at the beginning when it's all black and white and they're just fumbling with it. That's my life when I try this stuff. But yeah, that's
start
amazing.
somewhere, man.
But that's yeah. I mean, it takes practice. I'm sure that if he showed us some of his early stuff, wouldn't be as good as his stuff now.
Oh no. Space Ghost, I'm going, oh, because I did that like 10 years ago. I'm like, oh, do I really want to show them that? Oh my God.
What I love, what jumps out at me is like how well, and obviously you do more than just Star Wars stuff, but how well it aligns with Star Wars. Like I just watched The Last Jedi again, and Yoda has that line to Luke where he's like, the greatest teacher failure is. And I think so many folks out there, myself included, tend to be the type that are like down on themselves if something doesn't work out. But I love that mentality about, well, because it didn't work out for this project doesn't mean it can't be used for something else or that a lesson can't be drawn from it. And I think that's really inspirational. That's amazing.
Or it could be the signs of a hoarder.
This is actually an intervention, so now that
I don't know. I've seen some of the things that you've recycled some other things into on your channel, so I don't know.
Well, it's been a pleasure to meet you, and I hope to share a beer with you once we can all get back together at cons and such.
You put it in the universe, it's got to happen.
There you go.
Right.
All right.
All right, Tom. We'll catch you again soon.
See ya.
Thanks, Tom.
All right. So
so I'll just jump in here for a second too, because you're talking about what you can use your printer for and if it's worth it for you. And I've been doing
I gotta fix things
cosplay stuff with it. What's that?
I gotta fix things here again. You go on.
Okay.
Keep talking. I gotta get Tim's video back in here.
I've been doing some cosplay stuff, obviously, and I built the Mud Trooper last year or 2 years ago with Tim and so forth. But now as I'm learning more stuff, and as now I get the 3D printer, I'm like, I can print this, I can do that, I can change this part. So there's that stuff going on. But then also I'm looking on Thingiverse, and I'm like, oh, I need to get some sort of a clip to hold this in. They have them on Thingiverse. It's like I do woodworking in the shop too, and there's other things that would work with tools I have to either a holder or something like that to make it work. I'm like, I can print one of those out,
And that's kind of what I was thinking about. Like, you can use the 3D printer for like little knickknacks and stuff. Like, you can actually create your own tools. And I've known people who, like, something is broken around the house and they're like, oh, I'll just print one.
Yeah,
I don't know, like
I don't know where I can get it, but if I can find somebody that has a file for it, I can. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's tons of stuff like that. I mean, little things to clip and hold your headphones or to hold a cable on a desk, that kind of thing. Tons of stuff out there, and you think of it, and you're like, let me just plug into Thingiverse and see if it's there. Oh, it is there. Look at that. And it's just really cool to have that kind of access.
Yeah, and like we're getting back into D&D for since a long time ago. Print up your own character.
Yeah.
If you want to have a little model of your own character, I'm sure that you can find the files for it out there.
There is a website, and I'm not vouching for them because I haven't actually used them other than just to tool around with it a little bit, but I think it's called Hero Forge. And you can design your character on this website and they can print it and send it to you, or you can download the file and print it on your own 3D printer.
Now that would be nice. That sounds cool.
Pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So there's a lot you can do with that sort of thing. I want to, so a couple of things. So you had a series for a while on your Mandalorian helmets, and it was the Mandalorian Friday.
Yeah, the Mandalorian Friday update.
And that was cool too, because that was another one of those things where you had, it was very educational because you had one that you had built upright, but then you've got all of these filaments and stuff to go all the way up inside the helmet to kind of hold it in place. And then it stopped like 97% of the way through, right? So you didn't get the top of the helmet. So then you had to print that. And I'm thinking, oh, well, that whole, what a waste. And you're like, no. You just print that little other 3% and you put it on and you like do some magic.
Glue it,
and that's all good.
And
then you have another one where it's like, okay, so this time I'm going to try printing it upside down. And that way it just builds the walls and it doesn't have all that waste of filament on the inside. But then that ran into some things too. It's just like watching you kind of experiment your way through this stuff is really awesome.
And I think I figured out the biggest problem with the way those print is they print, you're trying to print into open space.
Right.
So this guy here, when it prints straight up, when it's printing out into open space here, you get waves, and so that has to be fixed. So I was thinking that, what if I just change that and just did it at I think I read somewhere, if you just print something at a 30 degree angle, that changes all those values to where it's not printing in the same way. So I might be printing another helmet.
Yeah,
I'm running out of helmet space.
Yeah. And I've been digging into the settings too, and you can change some of the settings for what the overhang angle is for where it's got to print support, where it doesn't.
Bring that back down for a second, Kelvin.
If you set that on an angle you're showing, Kelvin, that would be why it wouldn't need that support for it.
Interesting. I wanted you to bring this back down for a minute because I watched your video where you were talking about how you decided to come up with the design for this, and I love it. I am not at all a fan of the original Battlestar Galactica. I didn't watch it growing up. I think my parents didn't let me watch it for some reason. I don't know. Maybe it was an age thing. I love the reboot.
Be friends anymore.
Yeah. Well, I'm not as old as you are, Lou. So
not far behind.
True, but I have to say, I love mashups. Like I love mashups, and this concept of mashing up a Battlestar Galactica helmet with a Mandalorian helmet is absolutely brilliant. And I mean, you pulled it off so well.
Well, thank you.
It's just absolutely stunning. Like as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh my gosh, that would work brilliantly. And I never would have come up with that.
Now you got to pair some of the chest armor with one of those suede jackets they had. Yeah.
See, I had the same thought. I'm just like, well, I got the helmet. Now I have to make the armor. No.
You have to.
No.
You'd be a hit at Comic-Con with that. That'd
right?
be awesome. Be awesome matchup.
And people at conventions love mashup stuff.
Yeah, but you know what? I hate to say it. I'm not a fan of mashups. I like to keep my peas and corn separate, man.
I'm with you, Kelvin, but I like that concept. It's a pretty cool concept.
Well, so the way I came up with that, so I got to talk to some guys on another website, you know, and the way they were coming at it is like, you're the 13th, you're one of the lost tribes, you know, and so they got on my site after I came up with that idea, you know, and they were saying the other day, just like, well, one of them likes Cylons and the other likes the Colonials, and he said, well, it needs a red light in it, and I thought, well, no, that wouldn't work unless the Cylons found the 13th colony first. And I'm like, so now that's another helmet. Now I got to make a silver helmet, you know, with the light.
Yep.
Create more work for yourself.
Yeah, so I gotta slow down. either that or get another printer.
Now that was actually the second of 2 Mandalorian helmets you made recently. Can you show us the other one that?
No, I can't. I cannot send you. I cannot show you the other one.
Oh, well, okay. I'll.
Oh, look at that!
Look at that!
Look at that!
My lighting is not good today because one of my lights broke, but that is awesome.
That's fantastic.
That's cool.
I got to tell you though, Eric, you made it way too easy for me because you and I had talked about doing something a long time ago, and so when I had the helmets, I'm like, what am I going to do with them? Well, you know, and so I got it painted. So I had the base color going based on kind of the conversations you and I had, and then when I had to come up with the secondary color, I'm like, I wasn't sure. I'm just like, I don't want to ask him, and so I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna go for broke, and I put the light blue on there. And I said, hey, so let me know what you think in the comments. And you comment, oh man, that blue looks great. I was oh, thank God.
It looked great. Like it's the perfect, again, my lighting in here is not what it usually is because I just removed the thing that I normally have my main key light attached to. So I'm going to have to figure out a different way to mount that. But anyway, I'll show it off in another episode. But the contrast between, I mean, you need accent colors, right? And a lot of times if you have something that's mainly a dark color, then you use a lighter accent. And if you have mainly a light color, you use a darker accent. And I mean, I like blues, and I like the fact that it is blue and it's a dark blue. It's a very, you know, it's a strong blue color. And then that light blue is the perfect accent color for it. And there's that level of contrast where it blends, it fits, and yet it gives more definition to the helmet. It was a perfect choice.
The problem I have is I am a fan of gunmetal. So gunmetal and purple. So purple.
I am too. I like purples and gunmetals.
So Kelvin, I got to say something else here too. Now you've led me down the path of the 3D printer, and I blame you for that. But you know, it's a good thing. And you know, one thing leads to another. So now you keep thinking, well, now what do I want to get? I want to do this too. I can do. Oh, hey, but what kind of tool do I need for that? Well, so my next thing on my list is going to be an airbrush. I'm definitely going down that path. Been doing a lot of research online, seeing videos, and I'm like, yeah, I can do, because I mean, I can be pretty good with a rattle can, but I'm not. You know, you can't do the detailed stuff for that. But I'm like, okay, this isn't that much for it's only $100, and I can do some pretty cool stuff with this. So yeah, I'm thinking that's my next purchase is airbrush.
That is definitely a good thought, good way to go. And I had done the same thing. I'd done the rattle cans, and then I thought I need to step up my game to an airbrush. And I do have a good airbrush, nice pistol grip, it flows. But all the little things that it takes to learn, all the little tips and tricks for the 3D printer, you have that same problem with the airbrush, making sure you have the right kind of paint to flows through it. Make sure you don't mix your paint. You have to be, I have a little kit where when I take it apart, all the pieces have to go somewhere so that I know I get them all back in there. They're it's almost an overthought that in order to step up my game, I have to get an airbrush. but if you want to use some more of the specialized colors, yeah, you do. If you really want to do that, but don't feel like you have to.
No, but I'm getting to the point where there's some things I want to do that I know I can't do any other way besides getting an airbrush. And it's just one more thing I got to learn, which I'm not really looking forward to, but it'll make things nicer in some respects. But
once you get it, like the top of this was done with all clad, and that stuff, man, it's like water. I've seen some
gorgeous stuff on all clad. Yeah.
Yeah, and then if it's like a buffing metallizer, and just the more you buff it, the shine. Oh my goodness, there's some.
Yep.
If you want to make plastic look like metal, all clad.
Yeah, I've seen some videos of these guys doing, tests on the back of plastic spoons and stuff. It's like it looks like legit metal when they're done. I'm like, holy, and they, it's like straight out of the gun, just a couple coats, and there it is. I'm like, holy goodness, that looks amazing.
Well, I want to ask one more question. We're running a little bit long, which is okay. Like I'm not complaining, but. And so here's my thing too, Tim, you could probably get into this because I know you've got the space for it. I live in an apartment. I don't have like just all the painting and like the mess involved with some of going all the way down the rabbit hole in some of these things. Like my big art project recently was clay sculpting, which is also something that people do. And they make Star Wars figurines and all kinds of different like superhero stuff. Some of the stuff's like crazy detailed, but I'm not at that level yet. But that's at least not as messy as, all these different kinds of paints and spray cans and airbrushes. But I still think I'm probably going to pick up a 3D printer because I think there's so many different uses for it. And I can probably get by with what little additional stuff I need to do. So for the people out there who after hearing this might be considering getting a 3D printer. And again, I want to point out your channel, I don't have a 3D printer and I'm subscribed. Just saying, because it's fun to watch you do this stuff. And I also don't cosplay. I'd like to. And so if you're watching this right now and you don't have a 3D printer and you don't cosplay and stuff, still go subscribe to the channel because it's good stuff. But anyway, what advice would you give to someone just getting into like maybe wanting to pick up a 3D printer and getting into kind of easing their way into it? Are there any, like, is it pretty straightforward or are there some like big mistakes? Like whatever you do, don't buy this or don't do that. Like, is there, or advice to say, definitely do this? Like what would your advice be to someone just getting started out?
So I feel like my printer is a good starting printer. It's a pretty good size. I think it's 400 by 400 by 400 by 400 by 400. So it's big enough to print a helmet. Okay, and it was only about $350. I think that's reasonable. Anything under $200, I think you're asking for trouble. Okay. So just be willing to spend a little bit of money.
Quality costs money.
Yeah. So you have to be technically savvy enough to assemble it. The instructions are pretty good. Okay. But I think the hardest part is getting the bed level. Once you get that bed level and you can get your Aquanet to make sure your prints adhere to it, it's almost a plug and play proposition. You download the file, you stick it in the thing, you say run, and you walk away. And you babysit it until it's done. You go to bed with it. You wake up in the morning with it. You call your wife at home and say, "Can you go downstairs and check on my print?"
I'm glad I'm not the only one who's done that. Yeah.
It's just,
well, it's funny because I think my experience with mine was different than yours too, Kelvin. Because when I got mine, I had mine up and running like within maybe a half hour of when I opened the box. Mine was more assembled out of the box than yours was, I think. So some of the newer kits are even less work to do on the user's end. It's everything's more assembled. I just had to put, the uprights on and some of the supports and I was done. But I've got a different experience than you do too. I level my bed every time I go to print. because my bed somehow doesn't seem to stay level. The springs aren't quite what they, maybe I need to upgrade the springs. I know somebody on your channel talked about doing upgraded springs, which I still haven't done yet. But it's like if I haven't printed in about a week, if I get down to print tonight, I will heat the bed up, level it, let it sit for like 5 minutes, come back, level it again. Because it'll be out of adjustment by a little bit. And I'm not talking huge amounts, but when we're talking, a 0.2 millimeter layer, it's got to be pretty spot on. So you level it with a piece of paper between the print head and the print bed. And if it can drag, you're good. And I'll come back down a few minutes later and put the paper in. I'm like, there's not even any drag. What happened to this thing? And it's like 2 or 3 turns out. And for me, if I don't have it quite leveled, my print fails in the first, after the first layer's done. So I think everybody's experience may be a little bit different, but it's just a matter of, getting used to the quirks on your own machine and kind of how you want to print. And it could be the temperature in my basement is off too. It's not, it's not the same temperature all the time. So that could affect how things print. I mean, if I had a full enclosure for it, it would probably stay heated better and wouldn't have as many fluctuations as far as the bed goes. But when it prints fine. I very rarely have a print fail after it's been printing for a while. Yeah. If it gets past the first couple layers and I start seeing, it'll print a bed or a raft it prints on and prints the piece on top of that. If I get into the print of the piece itself, it's probably going to finish. I did have that one experience we talked about on the SE14 blaster. I was printing vertically. It would get, 4 or 5 inches off the bed and it was just too wobbly. It would fail. It's just one of those things where you'll learn your printer more, and the more you spend time with it and kind of the more you think about it mechanically as far as this is a tool, you'll get used to what you need to look for and what's going to be happening. I'm not saying I could repair mine if something failed internally. I may just have to buy a new component, but for the most part, it's not that. I was more intimidated by the thought of it than I was about actually printing once I got into it.
Okay.
And to your point, Tim, I'm sorry, Eric, I had a problem with one of my feeds, and I went in there and somebody had a 3D printed fix for it. So it fixes itself.
That's funny. That's cool.
Nice.
It's like Skynet in your basement.
Right. It just improves itself.
Robots. What could go wrong with that?
Cool. All right. Well, it's been about an hour. I suppose we should wrap it up. I kind of don't want to, but I guess we're going to have to. We want to thank you for coming on.
I have one question before we actually go. So, what's your
please.
What's your next project, Kelvin? What's your next big thing you're going to work on?
Good question.
Oh, well, okay. So are you aware of like the Bandai models? They did the Death Star attack run kit. So it's like an L-shaped model.
See, I saw your video on this.
Right. So my thought on that was, and I've seen a lot of guys, what they do is they'll buy 2 of those kits and they'll put them together, make a really long chase scene, or they'll put them like L to L like that. So you have a channel, and that's all well and good, but I like trying to be a little bit different. So I thought, well, what if this was like in an asteroid? So have the L shape there, and then where it would go flat, I was going to 3D print like the opening, with the cut corners. And that would be, it'd be like a landing bay on the top of that. So it'd be like if it was tucked back into an asteroid. So like the Alphabet Squad, those novels are out. So it would be like their secret base. Mm-hmm. But in order for me to build that properly and figure out what the scale is, I actually have a U-wing model. I have to build the model in order to figure out the scale so I can build the model.
Sure. Yep.
That's where I am,
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, once again, I want to recommend people subscribe to your channel. If you go to YouTube and you do a search for Mediocre Modeler, if you don't know how to spell mediocre, ask somebody. Because I know there are people out there who I think I probably mistyped it at least once, but and we'll put a link down in this description as well, but check it out. And like I said, even if you don't have a 3D printer, subscribe, because you make some awesome stuff and it's fun to watch the process you go through. Each one of those things you make, there's a story and a journey behind it. And I like the fact that you take us through that instead of being one of these YouTubers who's like, okay, I've got a project. I'm going to do it 8, 9, 10 times until I get everything perfect. And then I'm going to go make a YouTube video about it. And then we see the perfect run, and we don't see all of the trial and error stuff that goes on before that. Because that's what we need to know about. if we're going to get into this, or even just the story behind it is part of the fun. It's the journey of making the things. And even not being a prop maker, watching you do these things and press on through things that didn't quite go a way that was ideal. We run into other things in life like that too. And so that's kind of given me some inspiration to, what, that's okay. Just work around it, recycle that thing for some other thing, and just press on and get some Bondo and stuff, and it'll be fine.
Make sure it's fresh Bondo.
Bondo. Doesn't work in Windows as well as you'd think. Microsoft and Bondo, they don't. But I'm working on it. I'm going to find a way. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode of Force Chatter. Kelvin, thank you so much. Welcome. First of all, for the Mando helmet, I owe you some filament. But also for your channel and for joining us on the show tonight. It has been an absolute pleasure, and we are going to bring you on again.
Cool. I'll be glad to come back.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. So that's going to do it. Be sure to hit randomchatter.com for all of our other podcasts and hit the subscribe and like button below. And we will see you again very soon. Take care, everyone.